All right, what's up, familia? Familia means family in Spanish. Um, just an icebreaker because we're transitioning back into this. Y'all, the one South African gift that I have is, do y'all, Lion King, is that a big movie here? Okay. Um, I found out when I was a couple years ago that I can do Mufasa's voice. By the way, they're making a new one, live action Lion King, like the Jungle Book, how they did that. And James Earl Jones is going to come back and do the voice. But he's the guy that can say, Simba, you deliberately disobeyed me. And so, and he said everything the light touches is our kingdom. And so I don't know, it's the one thing that I know there's a South African somewhere deep inside of me because of that. All right, so let's talk about discipleship. Fam, so this is the current guy that disciples me. I don't know if y'all, I don't think y'all have these here, but in America there's this big building where they sell like everything. Is there like, what's the sell everything store here? What is it? Chanabo? China Mall? China? Really? And there are China malls everywhere? Man, they got y'all. China Mall. China, and the Chinese brought it and then sell it to you? That's funny. Well, we made our own, Walmart. So we have Walmart, and this dude right here is the architect for Walmart. And so these things are massive buildings, like probably 3 or 4 times this size. So it's not that it's a lot of design that needs to go into it. It's just a huge building, and there's one in every city, if not multiple. And so as you can imagine, a common excuse for business leaders I always see is, I don't have time. This is the phrase I always like to tell someone because I wanted him to disciple me. What I love about this guy is he's he's a mover and shaker. I don't know if y'all use that phrase. He does things, big things. You said y'all have a rap culture. He's got really big rings. It's a Drake reference. Basically, he does a lot of great stuff. He invests in a lot of great things, but that means he's going to be crazy busy, and he legitimately is crazy busy. So how is he going to disciple a guy like me? And so what I always say is discipleship, again, mentorship is meet with me. I don't want to meet with you. I like to tell guys usually, when I say discipleship, what I don't mean is that you could never meet with me ever. And they're like, what do you mean? How am I going to disciple you if I never meet with you? It's because my line is, I don't want you to add me to your calendar. I want you to include me in your calendar. So nothing about your life needs to change. I need to change my life in order to follow you if I'm serious about it. That's what the disciples did. Jesus says, come and follow me. He doesn't change his calendar. He keeps going, and they either move or they don't. Case in point, where this didn't happen, there could have been a 13th disciple, which would have been the rich young ruler. It's one of the few times where I see Jesus say, hey, do this, sell everything you have, and come and follow me. Notice that the guy that had legion taken out of him, cast into the pigs, he asked if he can follow Jesus, and he says, no, go home. He doesn't let him follow him. But this guy, the rich young ruler, he says, follow me if you sell everything you have, and he doesn't want to commit to that, and he doesn't want to change his life to move around Jesus' life. And so all that to say, including into your calendar means you don't need to change it. You just need to invite people in. What that looks like for me, before I go into his story, is one of y'all are asking is, I use my Gmail calendar. I don't know what your calendar looks like, if it's online or if you're still using paper. But for me, I'm not using paper anymore because I lose it too much. So what I do is I include my 2 guys that I disciple, Spencer and Omar, where they can see my calendar. But also, once I know, like, the goal setting, what are your goals of what you want to do in your life? Where do you want to be financially, physically, spiritually? Then it helps me know, oh, this guy wants to be, let's say, a consultant. Well, there's times when I do some consulting. I'll think, I should invite Omar to this, or I should invite Spencer to this. If I don't know where you want to go, it's going to be hard to know what I should invite you to. But it's not only on me to invite. I could invite, you could see something coming up in my calendar, but also something that happens. It was funny because someone asked just in the back room, like, what does it look like for you, who you disciple? And this guy named Omar, he texted me 2 days ago. I'm on the way to Dubai. It's funny, it's # Dallas, Dubai, Durban. And so I was in Dubai, I was in the middle. And he said, anything I can join you on today. Omar often does it. Well, both of them actually do it a lot, where it's kind of like maybe they get off early or they just have free time and they say, hey, are you doing anything this Saturday? Can I just come with you? And so he said, anything I can join you on today? And I said, yeah, I'm South Africa. Just come by real quick. And so he texts back. He's like, all right, I'll see you soon. And so basically, sometimes they could just find free time. You could use your free time on Facebook or Fakebook, or you could go and get discipled. It's up to you. One is going to be a game changer. The other is going to be there tomorrow. I promise you that. And so that's kind of what it looks like for me. It's just how do you give people your schedule, and then how do you include them? And there's nothing that I think sometimes we think this is the kind of things that you should invite them to, like the highlight or the mountaintop moments. I think, like, for me, I would want someone to disciple me in how to buy groceries and cook. Like, that is something my parents just never taught me how to do. And so just to even do something simple as, you might think, going to the grocery store, that is that simple. Or how do you pray in the morning? This guy right here, Raymond, he said, okay, I'll disciple you. I don't have as much time for you to join me in my business life or my work life. And by the way, I'm not saying that you need to join them for all four. It's not discipleship. Just trying to go into those wherever possible. And sometimes it's not possible. For the church, it's actually a lot more possible to invite people into your work life. For him, as an architect, he's traveling a lot. I can't go with him as much. But he said, well, you have here a private life. I'm a runner. Will you be willing to run with me? And it's like, totally, let's do it. I want to get in shape anyway. It doesn't hurt to have a guy that's going to run, because I struggle at running by myself, just running. That's it. It's just like all you do is run. But if I have someone that I can have a conversation with, then yeah, let's do it. So he said, I don't know if y'all have a running culture here, but in Dallas, or just America, they put stickers on the back of their car when they run a lot. It's like they do marathons, and I think it's like 23 miles. So they take a lot of pride in it to make sure people know I ran 23 miles. It's on the back of my car. They wake up early in the morning to run. And so I knew when he said, let's run, he's a busy man. He's probably going to do it in the morning. And when I asked him, by this time it was actually through text message, I asked him, okay, so what time and where? And he said, meet me tomorrow at 4. And so, again, if you want to be discipled, you better be willing to move your life, your location, your schedule, your time around their time. The disciples, James and John, got out of the boat, left their dad there, and followed Jesus. Like, he calls them from the shore. They get out of the boat. I like to think, and I'm like, what if they swam from the boat this close to? And it said he left them, and I think, just imagine their dad coming back home and saying, like, honey, I'm home. And this is a joke, and we don't know if this happened, but I like to think, like, honey, I'm home. And they're like, where are the boys? And he's like, they went to go be with Jesus. And she would just gasp, like, oh my God, they died? Like, no, like, they literally went to go be with Jesus, like, they followed him. So he says 4, and I'm like, golly, okay, let's do it. I'll be there tomorrow at 4. So 4 a.m., he's got a big office in downtown Dallas. That's where he runs. I'm there at 4 a.m. And so I would like to tell y'all that was one of the best discipleship days of my life. But the reality is, he didn't even show up. He didn't show up. And he called me, or he texted me about 7 a.m. I didn't wait 3 hours. I went back home around 5. And he texts me and he says, I am so sorry, man. I meant 4 p.m., not 4 a.m. And so that was my first impression of discipleship with Raymond Harris, the architect for Walmart. And here's the cool thing, though. That wasn't a fun experience. It wasn't terrible. I wasn't going to be doing anything else at that time. But what it showed him is, this dude will do anything to get discipled by me. He will show up at 4 a.m. in order to follow me. And there's a lot of labels on millennials right now, and I don't agree with all of them, but the one that I do see that I'm concerned about is the lack of hunger in our generation. And so what I want to show him is, like, there is a fire inside of me, and you have gasoline with all the wisdom you have. Can you pour gasoline on my fire? And I will say, the greater the leader, the more gasoline they have, but the more careful they are with where they're going to pour their gasoline. They want to multiply. They don't want to just add a little bit. They want to see that fire. And so I would encourage you, if you are serious about discipleship, then go all out. But if you're just going to do it halfway, there's just no way to do halfway discipleship. If you just want to play church, then play church. But if you want to go and be a fisher of men and change the city like Jesus did and his disciples did, then it's going to take that kind of hunger. And the more you show it, that guy, what's cool is when you join, also, little tidbit, when you join someone in their passion, then they go all out because they want you to love what they love. So this dude like buys me all this gear, and because he wants me to love running, and I've started to like it. He's like, man, I'll get you to do a half marathon. I'll pay for it if you do it. And so it's just so cool as I've now started to get into this running culture. Now we luckily don't run at 4. We do now run at 6. And so Tuesdays and Thursdays, before I flew over here, man, crazy. Yeah, I had a flight that we had to be there at 9. That morning, I flew. I ran with them, sorry. I did not fly. I went slow. So let's look at some of the slides. And by the way, that guy's just walked with me through so many things. It was such an intentional last couple months. And I just run with him and get to talk to him about life, and through the breakup that was publicly shown to y'all, through my family stuff that's going on. There's been some tension in like my mom and dad's life. Just through a lot of things, even through friendships. I always thought your high school friends, I knew they weren't going to be your friends forever, but I thought your college friends will be your friends forever. And I'm starting to realize as you grow up, like, life changes. People get married, and I asked him, like, hey, are you all your best friends today the same best friends from college? And he's like, totally not. Because I thought, like, man, what's going on? Like, my life, I feel like everyone's going different directions. He's like, dude, that's just a part of life. And to hear that, because I'm not going to hear that from a college kid. I'm not going to hear, I can only hear it from a guy that's decades down the road and say, that's not abnormal. That's just kind of the way it works. Every now and then you might see something different, but life, it's not that they're bad or you're good or they're good or you're bad, just life. And so he's walked me, or pun intended, run with me through a lot of things. Let's look at the next slide, some practical stuff. Let's say, and I think if you go into the workplace, you'll see this the most, is there could be some postures that need to be communicated when you go and get discipled. Let's say you were to follow Pastor Simon. By the way, you can't have like 50 people to follow the senior pastor. That's always like the first person they always want to go to. There are people in the congregation. Everyone should be discipling. And also, if you're a young adult, you should be discipling in the youth ministry. Imagine what would happen if that was the case. But some worlds, you can't just go into their world and just start talking at their board meeting or at whatever it is. Like, there's a place to dance and a place to mourn and a place to shut up. And so sometimes you just need to be a view. So just watch and learn for the future. So you're watching and then waiting, and afterwards you ask questions. Listen to me on this, y'all. Like, I've been reading the gospel and just, again, looking at Jesus not just as my Lord, my Savior, but my role model. And it was like I was reading a new gospel when I started looking at two things. What does he prioritize that we don't prioritize? And what does he not really care about that we so care about? And one thing I noticed was when I was looking at his model, a lot of the stuff and content we have in the New Testament is not from sermons. It's from discipleship questions and moments. Example is, we know the Lord's Prayer not because it's from a sermon. It's because the disciples were following God. And there's one time when they try to cast out demons, and he says, you can't cast these out unless you pray. And then they ask also, how do we pray? Just a simple, what could be seen as even a basic question. We know our Father who art in heaven, not because that was a great sermon series he did. There's just some questions along the way that the disciples asked. So there's a lot of times when Jesus does something, and discipleship is caught a lot more than it's taught. And so they catch it, and then they ask him. And so you might just be a view and then ask questions on the way to the next thing. Maybe it's on the car ride, maybe 10 minutes in transition to the next thing, you ask a couple questions. If you ask really great questions, if you are hungry, then they start seeing that hunger and they want to multiply it. But they may say, you know what, how about you share next time too? Be ready to be a voice. I might have you sharing this. What's great is there's so many people that are trying to understand millennials in young people, that if you can have maturity and speak when you need to speak and not speak when you don't need to speak, then people actually invite you to speak more, I found. And there's just so much interest in how this younger generation thinks. In America, I like to say that we so obsess over millennials and what they're doing and the statistics and all that. We kind of study them, I say, like whales. It's kind of like 70% of them are migrating over here, and they're all going to here, and they're gluten-free, and whatever. It's like 80% are leaving the church, and it's just percentages. You usually know it's not done by a millennial when all it is statistics instead of solutions, or it's research instead of results. So you can be a bridge to communicate like I do. I actually speak to some young people. I speak to mostly older people, and I get nervous when I speak to youth because I struggle with connecting with young kids. They don't want to be there. Their mom's making them be there. The older people, they're like, please help me with millennials. So you could be that and be a voice to that generation. Vote would be, I've started to see where they then invite you and say, hey, we are having a conversation about this, and I'd love to get a younger perspective in the future of what the church should do about this, or what our business should do about this, or even my son who's around your age, what should they do about this? You move down the row as you show that type of maturity. Next slide. This is so basic, but I found our generation struggles at conversations, like interpersonal conversations, and especially even how to learn. And so just the simple act of constantly trying to ask after every discipleship experience, whether it's a meeting you go and join someone, or it's a full day. Just for me, as my staff, I realize if I'm going to make discipleship a priority, then I pay my guys, and they can go and leave the workplace and go get discipled. Also, they can bring their disciples in, but I wanted them to then ask, and sometimes it could be a full day, sometimes it could be hour. Of course, it's within reason of what we have on our plates, but asking simply a why question, like, why did you do it this way? How do you, like a why question, a how question, and a what question. I've discipled a handful of guys that they see me on stage, and I think they want to become a speaker, and so they ask me to disciple them, and then they just follow me and they don't ask any questions. And I'm like, at first I was frustrated, and then I learned, I just think we are not used to following someone and trying to learn outside of a book or a message. Like, so this is one of the greatest ways, though, to show honor to someone is to ask questions. If you go to the next slide, if you're a millennial, this will save your life. If you do this, you will become the 1% that is different than everybody else. I promise. It's so basic. It's the most basic thing ever. If you just do these 4 things, I promise you, I know it looks so basic. If you put away your phone, you just became 10% of millennials. And then if you ask intentional questions, you just became 1% of millennials. If you take notes, you just became a freaking unicorn. And if you share stories of growth, like where they gave you advice with your relationship or your breakup or your job or school or whatever, and you then share how you listened to that advice and did it, they will continue to say, I want to pour more gasoline on this fire. You know how much it changes the demeanor of a leader when I am taking notes in front of them? Like, I'm like, hey, can I write this down real quick? You know how many millennials they see that do that? Do you think they ever see millennials do that? The fact that the bar is this low, to millennials, please listen to me. The bar is this low. It may not be this low forever. Take advantage of that. Let all the other millennials be punks. And so that I'm like, more mentors for me, more opportunities for me. Y'all can keep just living down here and keep that bar, because you just got to barely do a little bit to look like better than the average millennial. And so take advantage of it, or you could be typical. I personally want the last thing that defines me as being a typical millennial. And so as a church, I think we should be so set apart because our God is set apart. Next slide. I'll finish with this, y'all. This doesn't have to be your language. I do think every church and every Christian has to kind of define what does discipleship like levels look like in some way. But for me, we've defined it as this. If you are still at a stage in which you are not discipling someone, and I don't care if you've been a Christian for a year or 10 years, you're still just a learner. You're still being fed. You need to be fed. You have yet to feed someone else. I want people then to move. The next stage would be to be a leader. Notice that I make a leader is different than a disciple maker, because I think many of our what we call leaders are not disciple makers. They're just leaders in the sense that they are feeding people, or and someone's following them. And again, I would even say it's got to be following, not just meeting. But you're a true disciple maker, in my opinion, when you disciple someone who then disciples someone. Until you disciple someone who disciples someone, then they're just following you. And that's good. That's better than being a learner. At least you're leading someone. But we don't just follow me. It's follow me and I will make you something. We make them fishers of men. That means there's another person involved. And so until you entrust it to someone who entrusts it to someone else, then you're not a disciple maker, in my language. And then I want to be a multiplier. I think this is one of the greatest wins, is when you disciple someone who then disciples someone, and you don't even know those people at the bottom. Like it starts to, you invest things that get invested in. They don't even know it came from up there. That's true multiplication. And in a church where I started in saying, if the enemy's so concerned with division, and we are right in this season, I feel like, are so concerned with addition, and Jesus was all about multiplication. That's multiplication, where you grow your fruit on other people's trees, and they don't even know it's your fruit because you discipled someone who discipled someone. To me, I want to get to the gates of heaven and see my fruit on a lot of people's trees, and they don't realize it is. But we'll get a time to look back and see, wow, that came from there, rather than we just got a lot of people to show up, which is not a bad thing. That's, to me, it's like your pulse. I want to have a good pulse. I want to have good attendance in a church. But you can be 300 pounds, 500 pounds overweight and still have a pulse. There's then other measurements, like how much do you eat? How much do you work out? And so it's not either or, it's both and. But if you're just looking at attendance or your pulse, it's very limited. And you can get by and even maybe impress some people. But I think the future of the church is going to be born through discipleship personally. I want to show this picture. This is my hero. Like, this is the kind of guy. When I saw, this is a pastor in Seattle, and I saw that picture frame, and I was like, dude, is this what I think it is? And I said, is that the guy that you discipled? And did he disciple him? He's like, it's exactly that. That older man discipled him. He discipled that young guy, which, by the way, that young guy is the pastor of a church of maybe about 6,000. It was him or another guy under Tim Keller who they hired, and instead they went with this young guy. It's a Presbyterian church, and he's one of the youngest. He is the youngest they've ever had, for sure. He's one of the youngest Presbyterian pastors in the nation, and I would bet a lot of money that he has the level of maturity that would get him that kind of job because he was discipled. Not just because he got an education, but he was discipled. He got wisdom, not just knowledge. And then he discipled this high school student. And I said, do y'all even know each other? And he's like, no, that was like a retreat we decided to go on where we first got to finally meet each other. That is transformation. That's the gospel, like moving through the lives of people. And that's multiplication, not division and not addition. That's what Jesus was all about. So, I'm going to bring up Christy, and we're going to just do some 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of Q&A. So, if you guys, is there another slide after this? I hope there is. Yeah, no. Okay, go to the next one. Yeah, so questions, comments, concerns, or heresy that you guys see, feel free to bring it up.
So, if you can put up your hands, then we'll just give you the mic.
Okay, so my first question, that was amazing, by the way, thank you.
Thank you.
Is you spoke about the lack of hunger in the next generation and the millennials. How would you combat that?
How would I combat the lack of hunger? That's good. Christy, think about that if you have one. I'm serious. How would you combat the lack? I mean, to me, there's a book called The Tipping Point where it talks about how you change the culture is most fads, like skinny jeans are really big in America, probably everywhere. Like these jean jackets, they're really cool here. A lot of, like 5 of us have them. Yeah. It talks about how there's like innovators that are the 3.5%, and then there's like early adopters that are 13.5%. It basically shows how fads start. For me, I am trying to change the lack of hunger by separating those that are hungry get rewarded a lot more, and those who are not, don't. And that is against kind of the participation trophy mindset, which, by the way, millennials didn't come up with. Xers did, our parents. We were like 6 years old when that came up. We didn't come up with a committee to do that. But I have a program in Dallas called 72, and basically they apply to be a part of this program. And it's 72 young leaders that are impacting business, education, politics, arts and entertainment, media, and the church. It could be any of those areas in the city. And we take the best applicants because I want to pour gasoline on the ones that are innovating culture. And so that it makes these guys over here, I would say, I want to instill a healthy, frustration, sorry. It's still a healthy frustration with nominal Christianity. I want them to like see, man, I feel bored with my walk, and these guys that are hungry, they're like seeing life and fruit. And it's not just fake stuff, it's like, and they're hanging out with older people, and they're doing things in the city, and they're not just posting about it, like they're living it out. I think that is the way you always change culture, is you influence the ones that really do that. I don't know if that's the full answer. I don't know if you have something on that.
I think that is a cool answer, and I think mine is not the cool answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, if you're in Christ, the fruit of a Christian is known by their fruit. And my definition of a Christian is somebody who is surrendered to the authority of the Lord. And so I would say that in Scripture there's plenty of evidence, and we just talked about this, where we're intended for work. Before the fall, we're intended for work. And in eternity, we'll be working. And so for me, I'm like, hey, like to be a Christian means to work well, to work according to the Lord, to work hard, to labor. One of my just personally favorite roles that we get to have as Christians is somebody who pushes back darkness, who is light. And that is not a boring thing to push back darkness. Like, it's like war. Like, you got to be, have your armor on, ready to fight, fiery darts, like have the scripture, all that stuff. So it's taking people who do have a lack of motivation or a lack of hunger and saying, hey, first, I love you and I care about you and I want more for who you are than what I see right now. And so let's talk through like what lies are playing out that you are being not hungry or are being lazy, and like let's work towards a greater image of what Jesus was and would have you be.
So then the next question, sorry, I just want to ask this, is what do you think causes the lack of hunger? Because obviously, as you say, it's the previous generation that caused that. Have they been too spoiled or given everything? What is it that causes?
I do think being given everything. I do think being given a lot.
Like not expecting them to get summer jobs. You know, my students who come to Bible college, most of them haven't worked in high school, whereas like for me, growing up from 14, I was waitressing every school holiday. Like, would you say to parents, you got to put stricter requirements that they get part-time jobs, even if you've got enough cash at home? Do you think it's practical things like that?
No, I think that I used to say I want to feed hungry people, and if you're always getting food, you never really work hard for your food. And so I do think the season of this generation has been given a lot. I want to show y'all through a picture. Okay, let me draw this real quick. Because I had this and I never even used it. I'm going to draw it as quick as possible. Yeah, I can talk loud. Can y'all hear me like this? No. College job.
Distraught.
What's funny?
He has pretty bad handwriting, if you're all thinking it. He already knows.
Well, it's better if I do all caps, and so I started doing that. So let me. I think that we have our parents' generation really cared about us going to college, and the whole goal of college used to be to get a really good job. But now college, at least in America, has a better guarantee of putting you in a lot of debt than actually getting you a job. And so that's not fun. And then your job doesn't pay as much, as well as a big thing, our generation, at least in America, got to see our dad. I say this is one of the most fatherless generations, even if it wasn't from divorce, like the dad left, but it's like their dad exchanged their soul to work in exchange for their family. And so they didn't get to see their dad that much. And even if he was physically there, he wasn't emotionally there, which may be not worse, but it's a whole different level of rejection. When you get the divorce or he leaves, it's like my dad left and he decided once he's left and he's always been gone. When your dad stays there, but he picks work over the family every single day, you're getting rejected every single day for your whole life, and you apparently just get used to that. And that's because the dad or the parents' generation wanted to get the American dream, which I would say is just provision at the core of it, which is not bad. Provision, provide a better life for your kids. Any parent that doesn't want to do that, that'd be strange. And so that's good, but we made that like king, I think our parents did, and our grandparents, albeit in America, the Great Depression, it makes a lot of sense why you would want to, we got to work hard to make money. And the war, there was a lot more reasons to be hungry before, for generation before. There's no war, at least for us in America, and there has been no huge depression yet. What I think what happened is there's a book called Halftime. A lot of business leaders read it, and it talks about how our parents' generation and grandparents' generation got there, then achieved what they called success, and realized it wasn't enough. It was like, man, is this all of life? I've got the house I always wanted, the car I wanted, the family, they're in college, but is this it? And they realized success isn't the same thing as significance. And so they then changed and said, I want to leverage the rest of my time, talent, and treasure in the next decade, 2 or 3 that I have left, to give back into my city and the kingdom and stuff like that. I think what's cool about millennials is we care about significance not at the end of our life, but before we ever even go to college, which is awesome. I don't want a major that just, which makes it harder too though, and for my parents who are just thinking about provision, get this major that pays this amount of money. Well, it's not as easy for me because it's not a number, it's an impact, which is hard to, I don't want to just do something that gets paid, or I could just be a lawyer, a doctor, something like that. Now I want to do something that makes a difference, but I do need to get paid. But I would say our generation cares more about passion, a job that I can exercise my passion and accomplish my purpose. And so that's a game changer that I think a lot of parents struggle with understanding. And they're still, although they came to the end of life and realized it wasn't enough emotionally, spiritually, they are still trying to push this old model on us. And it makes it very difficult when all they care about is what job I have, how much money I make, and then I get this job. If I ask millennials, when was the last time your parents shared concern that you don't make enough money? All of y'all, like all the time. Like my dad called me before I even came here, asking about like money. It's always about money. I once, before initiative was finished, I finally started raising some funds for it so I can get paid. The first year we had nothing. He would call me like almost every week, and I'm like, Dad, we still have no money. Like nothing's changing. Like I have this time in my life. I'm single. I have an opportunity where I can do this. But he would always ask about it, and you know. At the end of the year, I said, Dad, you know, you have not called me once where you just asked like how I was doing or my life and stuff like that and didn't bring up money. And I'm not saying all he cared about was money, but he never talked to me where he didn't bring up money. Yeah. And so it can start to be like the core of our relationship revolves around here. It's not because my dad's bad. I think this helped me realize it's because the way he was taught to parent was to help provide a better life. But provision for Christians is not just money. Because my question to parents' generation and grandparents' generation is imagine if every millennial got what you thought your greatest dreams for provision would be for them, but you knew at the end of their life they never got to exercise God's passion he gave for them and never got to accomplish God's purpose for them. Would they be satisfied? And if you would be satisfied if your kid had great provision but not exercise their passion and purpose, then I think you are okay with your kid gaining the whole world and losing their soul. And that is what happened, and it didn't work. And so this is a complicated thing because millennials, you can't just do what your passion and purpose is about. You got to pay the bills or you're going to live at home with good old mom and dad. And so it's got to be all three, and there's seasons when it's just, I worked at a restaurant, and it was like, because I want to do this. And so I think this is really complicated. What hunger looks like is, I think we have a different scorecard, generations do. And so I'll say sometimes that not every millennial is lazy. Some of them are just uninspired by this American dream that doesn't work. So once we're on the same page, then I want to see, then are you serious? Like, can we spell out what you're passionate about, your purpose is, your provision, and then make a 5-year plan of what it's going to take to get there in those 3. If they're not willing to do that, then they're lazy, and then I'll pour into someone else.
That's awesome. I think we've got time for 2 more questions. So we've got one there, one over here, and maybe we'll squeeze one more.
Thanks, Grant. I really like what you say, Grant, about the success versus significance. And I think today on young adults and youths leaving school, there's so much pressure, not just on them from their peers and their contemporaries, obviously with social media. You speak of OCD, or obsessive comparison disorder. There's so much pressure. They see their peers having a good time, highlight reel on Instagram and Facebook, and they feel like they're confused because they don't know what their call is. Then there's pressure from home. Parents saying, you need to provide, when are you going to get your life right, what's happening? There's so much pressure to make a decision on what am I going to do for the rest of my life. And you speak, sorry, I'm going to ramble, but you speak about, we look at our parents, some of us, we look at our parents, we think, I don't want to work the same job for 35 years and be miserable when I'm 55. I don't want that, and they can't understand that tension. How can you, what tools can you expose youth, young adults to? How can you empower them to make a better decision to actually decide what to do with their life, purpose-wise? So many of them are confused. What do I do with my gifts or my talents? Or how do I actually discover my gifts or my talents? Because they don't even know about them themselves.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Please help.
Chrissy, can you speak?
So we have a program called 72 where we take young adult leaders from across the city for 7 months, people involved in business and politics, whatever, you name it. And a lot of people that have been in our program have had similar issues of what am I supposed to do? What am I called to do? And so throughout the program, it's often a discovery time for them as well. So something that we do, which is like super practical, which is where my mind goes, is one of the things we do with them is we'll do different personality tests actually and say, hey, not only like, what do you care about? But what are you good at? What are your strengths in? And then with young adults caring about the significance, kind of seeing, hey, if this is where your strengths are and where your gifts are in, and let's look at like the things that you might care about, that you might be inclined towards, and let's see where those things might intersect. And then I would say gifts, caring, where that intersects, and then finding somebody involved in that area, in that job, and saying, hey, we should pursue them to be discipled by. Like, I think there's a guy at the church that might know somebody who's involved in that industry. Let's see if we can get you connected, see if you can follow him for a week over the summer while school is out, stuff like that. And then they get a taste of it, and then they get connections in that area. So that's a super practical tip that I'd give.
Yeah, I think if you say you want to do something and you're not currently using the older generation or those above 40, especially if you're married, what they have, their greatest commodities, I would say, is wisdom is the highest, greatest commodity they have, just from pain and experience. I've heard it said this way, wisdom comes from 2 things, mistakes or mentors. I don't want to make mistakes. I want to learn from the mistakes that older people have made. And so they have wisdom, they have finances, and they have connections. How many of us millennials are looking for a job if we just had connections? Like, we have the qualities, we just don't have connections. Older people have connections. We usually stay in our own bubble with our own friends that know about all the same opportunities, and they all don't have jobs either. And so connecting with diversifying your age groups that you hang out with be a game changer. But then younger people, what we have is we have passion, we have creativity, but our greatest commodity, if the seasoned leaders have wisdom and that's their greatest commodity, I think our greatest commodity that we have only in this time is time. Literally time. Ask any married person how much time they have, especially if they have a kid. Anyone? Like, does it change a little bit how much time? We have so much free time. So what if we could connect all the time that we only have in this short season to all the wisdom from those that used to and wish they could have that kind of time again? That's what I want to do. Now, passion, purpose, and provision, what I would say is if you want to connect that time, connect it. If you say you want to do a nonprofit, then use your summer or your free time following someone. These are questions that I came up with. What I've noticed is most parents are only concerned about this, therefore they're always asking questions, and prodding and pushing their kids towards colleges and jobs and futures around money and provision. Not bad. I would also maybe switch this out with grit or work. It is the hard stuff that you have to do to accomplish it, and it is necessary. But maybe starting here, if parents would start here and then lead to this is the why, and this is what needs to happen in order to do the why. Jesus doesn't just say, come and follow me. If Jesus said, hey, come and follow me, he says, and I'll make you fishers of men. He tells us why. One of the worst things I think we do sometimes is just because I said so. Jesus never said because I said so. He tells us why. And he really can just tell us so. And so if he didn't do that, I don't know why we try to do that. It pushes people away. I'll finish with this because I know we're a little over maybe, is passion. Here's a couple questions. I'll probably email this, or if you come up to me, somehow I'll get it to you. Passion questions. What makes you feel alive? What can you talk about for hours? What I would say is writing down these things and trying to find the patterns of what makes you, of your passion, your purpose, and then looking at provision is what makes you feel alive? What can you talk about for hours? What job would you take a drastic pay cut for in passion? Where do you want to travel in your life for work and for fun? What kind of customers do you want to serve? That's going to tell you a lot about who you need to start surrounding yourself with. What kind of coworkers bring out the best in you? I've worked at a restaurant. They don't bring out the best in me. Like, Christy brings out a lot better than that environment. So you need to say, am I hanging out with the kind of people today that I want to work with in the future? Because if you're not, you'll probably show me your friends and I'll show you your future. You'll look like that in the future and you'll hang out and do the same things. What talent do you often get complimented on? If you keep getting complimented, especially by someone older, because they've been around the block, like if you look at if you YouTube Grant Skeldon, the oldest video of me in 2006 when I first got saved, I got asked to speak for 5 minutes, and it was absolutely terrible. It was so bad. I mumbled the whole way. It was just not good. And there was an older man, though, that saw something, and he said, hey, son, I think you should consider going to seminary. And for me, that was huge, because this guy I knew, he doesn't probably just say that to anyone. He saw something in me, and he spoke life into it. So what do you get complimented on often? What frustrates you when you see it done poorly? That's a big one. Like, when I see design done poorly, I just care about the way things look. That shows where some of your passions are. You probably know some of your passions, but start listing out, these are the things I'm passionate about. I'm not saying this will get you your calling, it just narrows some of it and focuses it. Some purpose questions. If passion is what I like to do, purpose is what I was made to do. What do you want to be remembered for? That's huge. At the end of your life, what do you want people to say about your character and what you've accomplished at your funeral? Are you even on track at all to live towards those things? What do people most often ask you to help them with? That shows a lot about, they see a gifting in you or something. What kind of husband or wife do you want to be? Are you preparing to be that right now? This is purpose. What kind of father and mother do you want to be? What group of people do you feel called to serve that are often neglected? Purpose question. What wrong do you want to right? If you could make a video message that would be viewed by the whole world, what would you tell them? What is kind of that heart message? Whose story in the Bible do you connect with most, and why? For me, Joseph connects with me for certain things that show my purpose. And then provision. Once you start narrowing that and realizing this is some of my passion, this is my purpose, what will it take to get there? Then you have to, and this is if you're serious or not. If you're not serious, if I see millennials say, well, okay, now I know I've got to and want to do something in this arena. If they're not willing to do this, I'm like, you're just talking, dude. You're just like any other millennial. But if you're willing to do this, which would be, what kind of sacrifices will you have to make in order to accomplish these things? What extra time will you have to give? How much money will you need to earn? There will be a season in which you may not have the job you like in order to accomplish what you want to do in the future. You may not get the pay you want, but if it's a part of a long plan, it can work. What kind of mentors will you need to seek out? What kind of people will you need to surround yourself with? What kind of people will you need to start avoiding? What time wasters will you have to cut? Social media. What kind of education will you have to pursue? Some jobs, I haven't graduated college. I don't need a degree in order to do this. But I've thought about being an adjunct professor, and I tried to go to college again, but I dropped out again. Because you have to have a degree to do that. I'm just not designed for college. It's so hard. What kind of education we have to pursue? What habits will you have to break? What habits will you have to form? If you could say all this, but you're not willing to do all this, then it's just talk. But these are just a couple questions I like to push towards, okay, these are the things that God's put me on the earth to do, and this is what it's going to require to get there.
Grant, I'm one of those from the generation that, and I love the word you've used, participation trophies. So I've done that guilty 50 times over. For those of us at my age that have done that, and I now realize as you drew that why, because we were challenged by our parents to get provision before significance. So actually now we have provision, so we want to make sure there's nothing our kids don't have. And so I've never heard the word participation trophy, but my son came ninth in an athletics race, and I went and bought him the biggest cup, bigger than the school has had for 40 years. And he asked me, he said to me, why I came ninth. I said, no, you won. And I did everything that you say is wrong. How do we who've done that, a lot of them are laughing, but a lot of them are guilty with me. How do we disengage that now from our son and our daughter? How do we change that? And it might be a simple answer for you, but I'd like to just hear it from you.
The simple answer, and I'm not a parent, so I want to just preface all that with this is perspective and opinion and conjecture. But I would say, just simply saying no a lot more. There are things my dad gave a lot of tough love, but there's a lot of things I, on the back end now, look at. Like when I dropped out of college, he didn't let me move back in with him. And I was at the time so frustrated with him for not letting me do that, even for a short time. But it did force me to enter into hard times. And here's the irony is I think a lot of parents are trying to save their kids from difficult times. But if any of us ask ourselves, when are the times in which you felt just an unbelievable intimacy and closeness with God? They rarely are on the top of the mountain. They're in very hard times. And so the way I would say it is we may be saving our kids from the Savior. Those moments where they get to have the Savior, because we're saving them from those times. And so some of it is letting them fail because Jesus, we trust, will meet them in those moments, because that's probably where he met us when we came to Christ and our testimony and all that. And I still want to stay at your house tonight. And let me stay. But yeah, just don't save your kids from the Savior. And then the second thing I would just say is exposure to hard things. I have found the more wealthy the family in Dallas, the less they want to show their kids or take their kids to hard places. And I've seen that really backfire, because then their kids go to college and meet kids that grew up in that and feel like they were betrayed by not seeing the real world. But gratefulness comes when you get to see what you have. And so as much as possible to go into hard places to create that gratefulness.
I think you did great.
Awesome. Last question. Can you tell us why Initiative? Why is it called Initiative Network?
Yeah. Before I started Initiative, I used to say I look for about 5 things in millennials. If I see a millennial that does these 5 things, I already know they're my kind of guy. They stand out. They're just different. They're unique. If they know what God's called them to do, they've thought through this. That's pretty rare. It's really rare, unfortunately. I know some that do know what they're called to do, but then if I ask them, what are you doing about that? Like this week, this month, today? A lot of times it's like, it's not that they're not, they're just hoping they think something's going to come and just happen. I don't think, millennials think like this is just going to change. And I like to say that Jesus never gives us the full plan. Like, he only gives us the next step today, and he's a lamp to our feet, not a lighthouse to our entire path. And no person in the Bible, like Moses, would not have signed up for what he signed up for if he knew how it would have ended. John the Baptist, I don't think he would have either. Got his head cut off. It usually doesn't. The disciples, no one knows. Only Jesus knew the full plan. And so when I see a Christian that knows what God's called them to do, they're doing something about it, therefore they're taking initiative, then I'm like, I want to be around those kind of people that just, there's something about people that just are faithful today, and God shows up tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
Awesome. Why don't you give them a round of applause?